This is our fluid mechanics group project. We are talking about blood flow and heart valves. My name is Anna Rafuson,
My name's Daniela Buendia.
and our other partner is Carolina Orozco-Ramos. So if you can imagine your heart beating, what is happening is that electrochemical impulses cause these muscles in your heart to contract. And so these muscle contractions are acting as pumps, pushing blood through its chambers and valves. If we imagine the chambers connected to the valves as pipes, then we can see this phenomenon similarly imitating fluid flow in a pipe. So if we look at our heart valves with a fluid mechanics perspective, we can study several topics including hemodynamics, non-Newtonian blood flow properties, efficiency being affected by turbulent flow, the varying shear stress at certain points, and the minor losses in the valves. To help better visualize the process of blood flow through the heart, we'll watch a portion of this video.
Now, all the valves in the heart act as one-way valves. They open to allow blood to go in the forward direction, and they close so blood doesn't come back where it came from. So I used an analogy, it's a little bit like the Panama Canal and the locks in the canal. The locks open to allow the water to go forward, the boat goes forward, and then the lock closes behind it so the boat doesn't go backward, and that's one lock at a time. Well, the valves act fairly similarly within the heart.
Some technical background that could help with the understanding of the subject would be to know the anatomy of the heart, so knowing what it is and the components of the heart, knowing the physiology of the heart, so what the valves do and how they perform the functions, and finally, having some knowledge on fluid mechanics would be helpful to know how the blood flow is calculated.
So now that we have a better visual understanding and some technical background of how heart valves work, we will go over some definitions. So overall, the function of the heart valve is to ensure that the muscle contractions produce an efficient and unidirectional flow, meaning blood is supposed to flow in one direction with no backflow or rather leakage happening. The next term is a leaflet. So these are thin pieces of tissues, maybe flaps, that make up the heart valves. We can imagine these leaflets as if they're doors that when they close, they refrain the blood in the chambers from flowing backwards. In addition to these single leaflets, there are also bileaflets, which consist of two semicircular leaflets that pivot on a hinge. In addition to the mechanical portion, material also plays a role into the design of heart valves. And there are two categories. The regular mechanical heart valve, which are typically made up of titanium and carbon, and the other material is the bioprosthetic heart valve, which is material derived from animal tissue such as porcine, which is pig, or bovine, which is cow. We can see in the images below a variety of valves combining the different designs. Like the one in the far left is a titanium mechanical heart valve with two leaflets. The valve in the middle is an example of the bioprosthetic valve consisting of three leaflets. And the last image is an example of a mechanical heart valve that has no leaflet at all. Instead, imitates a ball in a cage to regulate blood flow.
So now we'll be going over some research. In the first article that was analyzed, it focused on flow phenomenon that is induced by heart valves. So when blood is being pumped to the heart, it goes through a process called systole, which causes the mitral valve to open, and then blood fills the left ventricle chamber. Once the diastolic phase ends, the mitral valve closes. The heart begins to pump blood out in a process called systole. Then the left ventricle begins to contract, and the aortic valve opens and pushes the blood into the cardiovascular system. Flow structure simulations of the mitral valve showed that the MV structures to blood flow are asymmetrical. There was data that showed that the dynamics of the mitral annulus, which supports the top portion of the mitral valve, and the papillary muscles, which help the heart generate force by actively contracting, affects the kinematic of the mitral valve leaflets and the tordinae tendineae when the left ventricle is relaxed. When talking about flow phenomenon in the heart valves, blood is considered as incompressible and Newtonian. The equations for blood flow are the Navier-Stokes equations and the continuity equation with nominal viscosity. A heart induces a pulsatile flow, and the numbers that appear in the equations are the Reynolds number and the Wormsley number. The Reynolds number takes into account the viscous forces, and the Wormsley number measures the magnitude of the transient inertial forces to the viscous forces. Now we'll be going over some prosthetic valve hemodynamics. The tri-leaflet flexible valves are very similar to aortic valves, so they are usually implanted in the aortic position and they preserve the flow patterns. They consist of 3 flexible leaflets and a stent. The most commonly implanted is the bileaflet mechanical heart valve, which is typically made of pyrolytic carbon and is used to control the blood flow in a single direction. Simulations in the patient-specific heart were performed to analyze the flow structure in blood flow and the valve leaflets. The study showed that the left ventricle contracts in systole and the small flow structures at the end of distally are pushed towards the outflow pathway and come in contact with the valve leaflets. This interaction, as shown in Figure 1, leads to the leakage jets to penetrate into the left ventricle domain, which in turn leads to a coupling of the BMHV flow and the ventricle hemodynamics. The orientation of the PHV implant is very important for implantation. Studies showed that the flow pattern is highly altered after the valve is placed, which could lead to differences in the shear stress dynamics along the aorta wall. In the mitral position, computational and experimental studies show that the BMHV can change flow in the left ventricle. Although BMHVs are the most implanted because of how long they are able to last, the non-physiological cardiac functions they induced are linked to complications such as platelet activation and blood clot formation. TPHVs implantations do not last as long, so a patient would need another implant at some point. It was also found that blood damage and thrombi formation can occur near the valve and supporting stents. In the next article that we analyzed, we're going to talk about the study of 2 different kinds of mechanical heart valves and how their function affects the flow of blood in the heart. The names of these artificial devices are Carbomedics bileaflet and Berkeley-Shiley monoleaflet, which are devices that have been widely used to replace native heart valves that do not function. In this experiment, the scientists used a device called a left ventricular assist device that was filled with water, a non-Newtonian fluid, to specifically define pulsatile characteristics, a system called platelet activation states, and a simulation called computational fluid dynamics were used to analyze the properties of blood flow in these devices. Properties like turbulence, transient, and non-Newtonian blood flow patterns were to be determined. According to the research, the main complication of MHVs is thromboembolism, which causes attacks or strokes. Thromboembolism is a blood clot disease. Platelets are ellipsoid discs 2 to 4 micrometers in diameter that live next to red blood cells. It is said that platelet activation caused by non-physiological flow patterns activated by MHVs is the main cause for thrombus formation. With this experiment, the results using the PAS showed that the bileaflet MHV turned on platelets twice the rate than with the monoleaflet MHV. Also, with the CFD simulation, turbulent flow patterns were shown for both valves and discovered that for particles close to the leaflets, there were 4 times more shear stress exposure in the bileaflet MHV than in the monoleaflet MHV. In general, MHVs activate jet flow, elevated shear stresses, areas of slow separation, recirculation, and turbulence. These factors may activate platelet activation and lead to the development of blood clots.
So let's add some numbers to our blood clotting situation to better understand the broader impact and see the current problems engineers face with the valve designs that we have now. So there are varying shear stress levels that each valve reaches. There's something called the thrombus shear stress threshold. This is a range of pressure where if the pressure of the blood in the heart valves, if it lies between this range, blood clots may begin to form. So to easily think of it, it's that the greater the shear stress, the greater the blood clots will form. And this threshold lies anywhere between 10 to 100 pascals. And anything above 800 pascals will lead to something called hemolysis, which is an imbalance of blood cells, which overall cause greater problems in the heart and eventually leads to death. So for the sake of engineers and their heart valve designs, at the least, they should keep their shear stress levels under 800 pascals. And so if we look at the image on the side, the trileaflet valve reaches max turbulent shear stress of 450 pascals. This definitely ensures triggering of blood clotting, while the bileaflet and the ball cage valve, they don't have shear stress levels as high as a trileaflet valve. They are still considered to trigger blood clot formation and lead to minor losses. And so where does this lead engineers? There are many new heart valve designs currently in the process in attempt to restructure how valves work, such as the self-expandable type. But to further the research on mechanical heart valve design, it has been decided that the next best project is to start developing our computer power. As of now, blood flow is studied from a large-scale perspective. Very little is known about the actual trajectories of an individual blood cell. And to add to that, this research is done experimentally, which can be costly and time-consuming. But with a new approach of the Lagrangian tracking methods and the advancement in computational tools, this will allow engineers to predict the mechanical load and its trajectories down to the individual blood cell. So overall, the human heart is the powerhouse of the body. It supplies it with oxygen and nutrients. So without the heart valves, which is one of the main components, without it properly functioning, the body will face deficiencies and overall degenerate. This is why it is crucial for continual research of heart valves and advancements in computer technology to provide engineers with tools to design valves with better efficiency, lifetime, and durability. Thank you.